Hello and welcome to Mint's India2Global Emerging Tech webinar series. We have two maverick entrepreneurs joining us from Houston and Bangalore to kick this off. Krishnan Raman and Derick Jose launched industrial IoT startup Flutura in 2012 to take on global giants like GE and Siemens. Last year, Flutura's AI product Cerebra was ranked number one by Gartner Peer Insights Voice of the Customer report. Flutura's customers are the likes of Shell in the US, Henkel in Germany, and Hitachi in Japan. So that's hard-earned approval. We'll begin with a presentation by Derick on how Flutura is adapting to the post-COVID world, followed by an interview with Krishnan that we recorded earlier. After that, we'll have a Q&A session. So go ahead and post questions while we play this recording now, which we actually did while both Krishnan and Derick were in Houston right after oil prices plunged below zero, in the oil capital of the world. So here goes the video now.
Today we will cover Flutura's experience in rebooting from the events of the last 2 months. We wanted to cover three things in the next 15 minutes. The first thing in specific insights on behaviors, budgets, and mental models of the industrial buyer post the industries are in the green zone. So we took the valuation spread and looked at the signals which are emerging. So we found that consumer services, medical technology, pharma industries were in the green zone. Oil and gas, air and travel, as well as banking industry was in the red zone. And there are a variety of industries in between. So this is one of the first assessments which we did to identify which are the healthy sectors and which are not so healthy sectors. And given this, we'll have to figure out, this is a common behavior which will not change before the event or after the event. People need to squeeze out inefficiencies. People need to see new revenue streams. The priorities may accelerate at this point. Behavior will not change. We're also seeing a fundamental restructuring of both the startup ecosystem, which is servicing, as well as the large industry. From the customer point of view, we are seeing some of the mid-sized players getting consolidated. So there is a lot of M&A happening in the customers. From a startup space, what we are seeing is there were some highly funded companies which were overselling in the market, and some of them find it unsustainable given the new market conditions. Specifically, one Norwegian oil and gas provider, which is extremely well funded, has really shut shop in Houston. Other question we asked ourselves is, post these two events, which of our offerings are painkillers and which of our offerings are vitamins? So what is a painkiller offering? A painkiller offering really delivers value in tangible ways. You can perceive value in the first 6 months. There's instant results and there's a well-defined timeline in which they experience these outcomes. You're also able to provide a minimum guaranteed outcome. For example, if there's a certain pump for which you want to provide remote diagnostics. We can bring that equipment online within 90 days. And that's a very clear perception of value. Whereas a vitamin impacts the organization in very intangible ways. It's a subtle impact. It's an unknown time frame. And frequently, the contribution of the vitamin is questioned. It may not be due to the project itself that experiencing value. So we felt that painkillers will see accelerated selling the next couple of months, whereas all vitamins we decided to put on hold for the next 12 months because these are all nice to have projects, not really must have projects. And given this current times, all the must have projects will get active funding. Other lens we use to ascertain whether we have product market fit, what we call as in product market fit, is to ask ourselves 5 specific. So if our solution is chasing a particular problem, is there a clear line of sight to a budget which is allocated? Is this problem well funded? Is it one of the top 3 line items? The second question we asked ourselves is there a specific feature in our offering which really is finding vibe with the customers? For example, the fact that an engineer without needing data science can generate insights is very, very liberating for the marketplace today. And we have that in our product called Investment Bench. The third specific thing is, does our message find resonance in probably 2 to 3 minutes? Today's customer is increasingly very, very impatient, and they may not have even 10 minutes to ascertain the value. We should be able to really cut through them in the first 3 minutes. So is there message market fit? Does it find instant resonance? Is a question we asked ourselves. If not, really shape it up till we get there. The fourth is the pricing model itself. Earlier, they were willing to write a check for $1 to $2 million in one go from an innovation budget, for example. Today, they may ask for a spread out pricing in OPEX mode, where you're charging them, let's say, $100,000 every month. So a shift from CapEx to OPEX is something. So is there a pricing market fit? And finally, is there channel market fit? So there are the large industrial players like Honeywell, Hitachi, ABB, who can take an offering to the market. So which of these specific channels is equipped to take this offering to the right market? For example, we want to launch it in the pharma markets. Which of these 3 or 4 large players will help us launch into the pharma market very fast? So does our offering fit like a glove in the new world is a very important question we asked. And I think it's very important to spend a lot of time on these 5 dimensions. We should have won a subsea deal in Houston, the very weak oil price. And it was a very strong signal to us that the offering which we had sold them was definitely a painkiller. Other question we asked ourselves was, what can engineers learn from doctors? So if you look at the healthcare industry, they have made tremendous progress in diagnosing the health of a human being without necessarily having the human. They have a variety of data points. They have a visual intelligence into radiological outputs. And they're able also to see the person directly. So they're able to triangulate a plethora of signals to understand the internal condition of the human being. And the question we ask ourselves is, how do we bring that same technology to the industrial equipment? Imagine every equipment as being a patient. Today, if you have to troubleshoot that patient, technician has to physically access that machine. How do we move to a situation where we bring in a telemedicine of equipments, where equipment has a sense of fabric around it, and this sense of fabric is emitting data to a remote command center. The technician sits in the command center and able to do a root cause analysis, high-value equipment failure, or do a root cause analysis of operational processes. And if you look at the headroom for growth today, we feel more than 90% of these processes and equipments need to be wired up to a remote command center. And that's a phenomenal opportunity for multiple steps. The other factor was the economics of oil. So $36.2 is the break-even point for producing oil. The moment it dropped below that threshold, there is heightened awareness to all the leakages which are happening in the system. Today, if you look at a producing well, chief financial officer does not have access to all the real-time leakages which are happening in the op. For example, a technician may be operating a pump in the wrong way, which might be adding in some invisible cost to the itself. The CFO does not have eyes into that. So if you are able to give real-time eyes to the financial organization, operational process, a lot of interventions can be done in almost real time so that the organization can be saved. On every small drop matters in this case. Next offering is on the video analytics space. So there was this incident 2 weeks back where an employee of Walmart had sued Walmart following safety norms in this new world. They may want safety procedures to be followed. The HSE teams, health, safety, and environment teams of large manufacturing organizations needs to be geared up to ensure that using video analytics, they can figure out the hotspots where social distancing is not practiced within the industrial premises itself. And if they do not do that, they leave themselves exposed to lawsuits. So this is definitely a painkiller for them, and we want to advance this offering. In a nutshell, we are seeing some broad themes emerge: remote contactless diagnostics, new business models where we're able to move some of these payments from a capex mode, edge intelligence, where you do not have the luxury of a cloud. The equipment has a small piece of software which can sense and respond to events around it and self-heal. Fourth is autonomous operations, where there is a human in the loop. Autonomous operation, there's no human in the loop. And augmented operations, where there's a slight human intervention to take some actions. And finally, the rise of the machine-machine intelligence. From a technological angle, from a business model angle, we are revisiting everything which we took for granted. For example, oil and gas, even though Houston is doing bad, Saudi Arabia is doing very well, where there is a willingness to take some of these digital offerings in the producing wells. It could be new channels, it could be new pricing models. So the question we asked ourselves is, what are our top 10 riskiest assumptions to test, RATs as we call it, in the next 90 days? And whichever experiments work, we scale it. The experiments which do not work, we pivot and move on in life. So to summarize, we have three emerging themes. One is remote contactless support. The second is edge intelligence. The third is the rise of safety-related applications. And finally, we feel it is time to take very dramatic actions, not incremental actions. If you have not taken a very strong dramatic actions, we strongly believe that there are structural risks introduced into the health of this along any dimensions. It could be a dimension you take a action. It could be along the industry concentration. It could be the geography. And it could be the overall business model itself. But definitely bold moves are required at this point in time, because the old offerings will not cut it at all. So with that, I hand it over to Sumit and Krishnan.
Thank you, Derek. Great slides and great insights as usual. So we'll move on now to your co-founder, Krishnan Raman, who is also there with you in Houston. Firstly, very good to see you, Krish.
Thank you.
Right. So moving on to industrial AI skills, what do you see as the three key themes in the industrial AI or industry 4.0 space going forward in the post-pandemic world?
Sure. So, Sumit, I'm actually speaking from Houston. So I will actually talk about it more from a COVID perspective, but as well as cover it also from an oil and gas perspective, this being the oil and gas capital of the world. From an oil and gas perspective, there are two ways in which actually things are being hit. One is from a COVID perspective, the demand for oil and gas has come down. And because of that, actually the refineries and all of those downstream oriented businesses are actually getting tight. And on the other side, there has also been a massive reduction in oil and gas prices. So this has driven actually major constraints actually also from the upstream side of the business. Traditionally, it has always been that either the midstream will suffer if the oil and gas prices are coming down. Upstream will suffer actually if the oil and gas prices are coming down. But it will be beneficial for downstream. And if the prices are going up, upstream will be making merry, while downstream will have actually their raw material costs increased on. Now, this is a very, very unique situation so far we have not had, where both downstream as well as upstream has been impacted. However, while actually all of that is the tough part of it, a few key themes that are coming out from our industry perspective is, one, remote operations is no longer a luxury. It's a basic need for the hour. And remote operations of these plants will start with digital solutions. The second critical theme that I see happening in the market is, clearly, you would have all seen numbers actually in the US in terms of a lot of jobs being lost. But if you specifically talk about actually Houston, there is a massive amount of job losses that have actually happened in the oil and gas industry. And some of these jobs, in my mind, actually may not come back after. These losses are going to be permanent. So post-COVID, there is going to be a situation where the same level of operations would need to be scaled, but would need to be done much more effectively from a people angle. And it is going to be digital solutions. It is going to be AI solutions which are going to go ahead and step in and be able to go ahead and cover those. So that's the second theme that I clearly see in terms of actually going ahead and happening on. And the third theme that is that we are clearly seeing is, in fact, Mr. Modi's presentation about lockdown 4. Clearly, the drift is towards how more and more things can be managed locally or can be manufactured. And this is not going to be only an India-specific theme. This is going to be a theme which is quite global in being able to go ahead and happen.
Yeah, that's a really good perspective. Could you take it from there to tell us how startups from India, deep tech startups specifically, can, to use one of Derrick's favorite phrases, intercept the future in this kind of an environment?
Absolutely, Sumit. Sumit, there are two sides of the coin that I just want to go ahead and actually share related perspectives on Indian startups and how all of us Indian startups will be able to go ahead and look at it in terms of working in the future. On one side is COVID has been a great leveler. It has leveled the playing fields for companies across the world. If you were to talk about it in terms of actually the pre-COVID era, you will look at it that if a particular startup is actually having local access, they can stand in front of the customer. The customer is impressed more with it. But with COVID, just like actually we are doing this particular session, okay, we are doing it remote on a digital medium. This is the reality in every single sales conversation that is happening. So that entire aspect of having a local presence to be able to go ahead and actually win business, that is disappearing. And this will immensely help Indian startups with a more level playing field on other things. So that's actually one trend that I see when we talk about it in terms of actually Indian startups and coaching. But the other side of the coin, which is again very, very important, is one thing which COVID will definitely leave is it will leave behind a lot of startups unable to survive and actually grow. And that will automatically put certain amount of red flags and more in terms of actually criteria that will get checked when companies, that to large companies, start to go ahead and look at it in terms of evaluating vendors. So from that angle, the strength of the balance sheet, which usually always is not the strength when it comes in terms of an innovative tech startup, will be something which is important. And from that angle, from all Indian startups perspective, we will need to look at it in terms of how each startup is able to go ahead and shore up their balance sheet.
Very good. So the first point you made was about everything going remote and leveling the playing field. So can you share anything from Flutura's experience of Like, are deals actually getting signed, or industries haven't yet got there in terms of, you have conversations, but to sign a deal, you actually want to see the people, especially with, you are dealing in areas where these are multi-million dollar deals, right?
So, Sumit, very, very interesting question, and good that actually you are asking me the question today and not about a month on. Because 1 month back, everybody, they didn't know what hit them. When COVID as well as actually oil and gas prices actually went ahead and hit them, they didn't know what hit them. But a month down the line, people have thought. And they have started working with the new normal that is going to be there and how to start moving forward. To that extent, from our perspective, our personal perspective, we have had cases where we have had pitches with the customers and they just don't follow up. They going ahead and reaching out to us and looking at it in terms of actually wanting to set up conversations so that they can move ahead and actually progress on the digital. So, for example, a very interesting thing is actually a Fortune 100 original equipment manufacturer who we had gone ahead and looked at in terms of actually trying to pitch our solutions and trying to win them over. They had evaluated it, but they were so busy looking at it in terms of actually their quarter closes, how they are going to go ahead and finish off those quarter closes, that they didn't have time to talk to us at all. But with this entire thing, they are no longer able to sell their entire equipment on CapEx. So they have to today implement OpEx, which is a subscribe and pay as you go oriented solution, or a subscription oriented OpEx model solution on a war footing. And today, now they are setting up their conversation and actually coming.
I think if you could take me through how the scene has changed from earlier. I think even Flutura has lost out in some places to companies which came up with a lot of brochureware and knocked you guys out in deals. Whereas that is probably not going to sell as well now, right? The brochureware.
That's right. No, which is the reason why I said a high touch and a high form factor oriented selling is going to shift and give way to a more value driven selling. So it's a level playing field, and you are going ahead and looking at it in terms of evaluating multiple of those players on the exact value that is actually being brought on the thing. So that's going to be extremely, extremely good from this. In fact, on this direction, I didn't touch upon actually one more point related to it. Sumit, you were asking about actually a question on Indian startups. My personal belief is the entire Indian startup ecosystem, with all the emphasis on Atmanirbhar Bharat, is going to get a better opportunity to be able to test out a lot of solutions in India itself. So to that extent, what you were talking about it in terms of the entire credibility being built out, a lot of companies which are currently manufacturing, say in China, if they shift their manufacturing location to India, whatever you are talking about in terms of the industrial 4.0, digital 4.0 oriented companies, those new plants that are coming in and are being established, a few things are going to be mandatory. So, for example, the customer would want to mandate a remote set of eyes monitoring it, if not a remote set of hands controlling. So that is going to be an important aspect. And to do that, all of the new projects that are coming out in India will need digital solutions. And it can actually become a very, very good test bed for companies to be able to go ahead and actually test and establish their.
That's a good point, Krish. Just moving the perspective to your clients, and your clients are, very large enterprises and heavy machinery, oil and gas, process chemicals, that kind of thing. But, there would be other industries and various players that you're looking at in this kind of a situation. What's the perspective you can give me about some examples about how their business models are changing and where startups can get a door.
Sure. No, there are quite a few industries, Sumit, and in my mind, when I look at it actually across industries, the way I kind of perceive it is there are certain industries which are going to go ahead and take time to get by, whereas there are certain other industries will be quick to get back onto the feet and move faster, and there will be certain industries actually which will even move faster than what it used to be in the pre-COVID era. So very clearly, for example, actually, if you talk about pharmaceuticals, clearly an indication where across the globe there is this entire phenomenon that is happening. In US, actually, the entire country leadership is talking about it, saying that essential goods and mandatory medicines, there is no way it can actually be sourced from outside. So they are looking at it in terms of establishing a lot of facilities within the country itself. And I am sure actually Japan has gone ahead and announced it. So there are quite a few countries which are going to go ahead and look at it in terms of actually moving on. So some of those industries will be ahead of the curve compared to pre-COVID. They will have much more activity the moment actually COVID gets under control. They will have much more activity in some of these things actually happen. There are a few other industries which might get back into it fairly fast. So for example, actually, if you talk about it in terms of the downstream portion of our industry, oil and gas industry itself, people will definitely go ahead and drive. So to a certain extent, while the flights are still going to go ahead and take time in terms of getting on, to a certain extent, the downstream portion of the business actually will bounce back fast. Whereas upstream, there is a lot of inventory pileup that has happened, and the inventory pileup actually will result in that going actually. While if you really flip over and take a look at it on some of the industries like airlines and some of the industries like hotels, it's definitely going to take time before this. And people are also becoming much more comfortable doing it on a remote basis. So just like the session that we are going ahead and doing it, yesterday I was with an investor and their entire LP conversation. There is a quarterly review of LPs that happen. Their entire 2-day LP conference is actually getting run on actually digital approaches actually on this. And when I spoke to actually some of them, they were talking about it as actually being much more effective than what it was in person. While the networking aspects will suffer, it is not so this, but rest of it actually.
So you spoke about different industries being impacted in different ways, and of course business models also changing across the board. How, from a startup's point of view, how difficult is it to modify your value proposition to jump in where there is opportunity? Can you share anything from your example about what you've done to be flexible enough in your value proposition to be able to get in fast wherever there is opportunity?
That is right. So, Sumit, if you really look into it, the earlier mantra is always from a startup perspective, specialize. Because if you are able to, if you have a solution, and if it is specialized to a particular industry, your ability to repetitively prove value is much better. So I'm sure actually you have traced us. In fact, we have gone through that particular specialization journey where we had a particular platform which is applicable for any of the industries. But we had zoomed in to introduce verticalized, focused content for our chosen industry. So we had kind of narrowed down actually from an industry perspective. However, in the current scenario, if you were to go ahead and actually ask about us, we are looking at it in terms of adjacencies. So it is not about leaving all your core capabilities and strengths to run after something which is new. Anyone who is attempting to do that, in my own personal assessment, actually will struggle and will fall flat. But if you are able to identify adjacencies where you are playing to your strength, but aligning your offerings to specific industries. That is the navigation path that you should go ahead and look at it. And from our own personal, our own Flutura perspective, one of the things actually that we are looking at is there are certain solutions for process manufacturing which we were going ahead and doing for process chemicals. Now, some of those solutions are very, very aptly applicable for some of the adjacent industries. So, for example, food and beverages, which was never actually a focus area for us on this thing, but that is one of the industry that will bounce back faster on this. So, there is applicability for our solutions out there, which we are considering. Again, if you talk about it in terms of actually bulk drugs, again, it is a process manufacturing industry, but there are certain aspects actually related to FDA and other aspects that need to be addressed while coming back. But there are areas where we can go ahead and look at it in terms of actually playing. We can play both, and our solutions are applicable both in both actually in bulk drugs as well as formulations. But we believe actually it will be a much more easier entry path, probably looking at it actually from a formulations, from a bulk drug perspective. So you need to selectively evaluate and decide in terms of what is applicable.
Thank you so much, Krish. I think the insights you have shared and Derek shared earlier will be very useful to startups as they navigate the post-COVID world. Best of luck to you.
So thanks so much, Sumit. Sumit, in fact, actually, I want to leave you with another positive on a lighter note, actually, that we have faced in the this one. In fact, not personally Flutura faced, but what is some of the things actually that we saw in the market. There was an opportunity for doing remote operations, and that was sitting for signatures because there were security signatures, there were multiple signatures actually that had to get done, and it was sitting on those signatures actually for 6 months. And as soon as the lockdown got announced, all of those signatures came in 48 hours flat. So indirectly, there are certain aspects actually that are accelerating as well in terms of.
Yeah. Thank you. Great to see you guys, even though it is remote. We'll pick up a few questions from the audience going forward. That was great. So many insights, even though I'm listening to it for the second time. Welcome back, Krish from Houston, and Derek, you've made it back to Bangalore, right? I mean,
yeah, finally made it back.
I mean, that itself is quite an experience to share, right?
Absolutely. It was uncharted.
So many quarantines, lockdowns, and all that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, let me just, before I pick up questions from the audience, we have some interesting questions coming up, and while we are chatting, I hope many more will come. Just to update ourselves from when we spoke last to now, in the Industry 4.0 space, where do you see, a bounce back, or where do you see the best new opportunities? Krish, if you want to go for that.
Sure, absolutely, Sumit. Thanks for this. It was actually great. So, Sumit, if you really look at it in terms of current opportunities that are going on, though we had the conversation about a month and a half, almost 2 months back, it's kind of actually continuing on the same path. If you were to look at it, it's continuing on the same path in terms of recovery. Whatever I was talking about as actually green shoots at that point in time is starting to actually develop further, much further now. In terms of focus areas, they continue to remain remote operations, being able to run things more efficiently, effectively, being able to run things with a lower skilled workforce. That's the primary theme that is going ahead and actually happening on this. And the biggest change from what happened last time to what is happening now is that last time we were talking about actually some early conversations happening, whereas now we are seeing that being followed through, not just conversations, but going ahead and actually being followed through with actual action on the ground. So there are places where we are being selected. For example, there was a global tender on safety where we have been chosen, and we are looking at it in terms of actually implementing our solutions across more than 150 locations. If you talk about it in terms of another opportunity, we were working with them actually on the surface portion of their business. There was a massive evaluation that was done for the subsea portion of the business, and we have just been communicated saying we have been chosen for going ahead actually with that particular implementation. So slowly, all of those positive shift to sentiments that was happening slowly is starting to see the action on the ground at this point. But while that is going on, the other side of the coin is always there. There are companies which were able to go ahead and stretch through for some points in time. And now in Houston, while the COVID cases are also increasing just like in India, along with that, we are starting to hear news about some of those organizations which kind of stretched and sustained for about 6 months period, now struggling and are going towards actually Chapter 11 type of situations. So it's both news actually that are there on others. But one thing is very, very clear, something which I went ahead and actually shared last time. We have seen it in action on the ground. Digital is going to be the single theme that is actually going to emerge the strongest while this entire bounce back happens.
Good to know. Derek, anything to add? Because like you've been there and now you've come back here, in terms of looking at it from the Indian perspective, opportunities for startups here in the Industry 4.0 space.
Yeah, I just wanted to add the industries would be, one of the areas where we're looking at is actually pharma manufacturing. I think there is a lot of pressure to ensure that the batch qualities are coming on time. And so that's one area we're actively looking at. CPG, manufacturing to some extent, and defense also. Yeah, 3 sectors.
So let me, there's some interesting questions. So the first one is, with clients looking for ROI due to impacted cash cycles, and at the same time, innovations in the current scenario, how should startups maintain that balance? Either one of you?
Sure. So, Sumit, let me take the first stab at that. Sumit, you talked about the balance between innovation and action on another. Now, startup is the balance. Startup is the balance actually towards that. The reason why I'm actually saying that is because you think about actually a large organization where if innovation needs to happen, there is a complete collection of multiple individuals with their own individual priorities, their own divisional priorities that need to align. And it just doesn't happen. In reality, actually, it just doesn't happen. So increasingly what people are finding is startup is the right balance, because here there are none of those walls, none of those constraints to innovation that are there. And if you are able to work with them, you are able to look at it in terms of actually going ahead and moving faster. So to that extent, a lot of action happening at our end. In fact, we utilized about actually 1 quarter of time that was given to us in our life. We used it very, very effectively. We actually leveraged it in terms of launching, for example, Engineers Workbench, which is the next generation solution for self-service implementing self-service digital solutions. It's been a massive, massive achievement in terms of going ahead and actually doing it. We have gone ahead and looked at it in terms of revamping and looking at enhancing the multiple of our solutions. These are more in terms of what I call as actually the back office tasks, which always get neglected on others. But suddenly you are given actually certain time period where you can think and do certain aspects. Either you can waste it, or you can look at it on leveraging it and attending to some of these housekeeping tasks that are there. We were able to use it very effectively, so we have come back as a much stronger portfolio of product at this point.
So, Derek, I mean, from a client's perspective, it actually, this question relates to your point, right, about vitamins and painkillers, where clients are kind of focused on ROI, but they also want innovation. So,
no, I have a strong view on this. Many people will not agree with me, but I strongly feel innovation would take a backseat for some time. Innovation which does not result in instant gratification. Let me put it that way. Innovation which results in fuzzy ROI, it's buzzword based, may not take off. People don't have time for it. I think the kitchen is on fire. You have to extinguish the fire, right? So I think it has to be very tangible ROI based and quick return on investment. No time for long fuzzy projects. I may be wrong. I hope I'm wrong, but I think the instant gratification would be something which industry looks for.
So, Krish, this one is also, let's start with you. A viewer is asking, there have been multiple innovations that enable social distancing norms through technology. Do you see these as solutions only for the current scenario, or are these going to stay the course?
Sure. So, the way we have thought about it, Sumit, is actually social distancing is only one part of the larger perspective or the larger canvas of safety, health, and environment. So if you talk about it in terms of this thing, actually, we have thought about our video intelligence solution. Now, we are one of those unique companies actually which has kind of gone ahead and implemented things in a manner where sensor intelligence and video intelligence, rather than look at it separately, we have looked at it in terms of actually bringing them together to provide value. So in our focus, our North Pole was always actually towards safety, health, and environment. And in that, one additional component that has come. So for example, actually, if you are in an oil rig, you are expected to wear a helmet. You are expected to wear a safety vest. You are expected to hold the handrails every time actually you are using the stairs. In fact, I almost personally got evicted out of one of the corporate offices of an oil and gas company because I was not holding the handrail while I was actually going up the stairs. So there are multiple of those. A few additional elements, which is, are you wearing a mask? Are you maintaining actually a certain amount of distance between people? These are additional elements actually that are being added on. However, holistically, if you really look into it, the entire, it's not just about social distancing. It is about actually overall workplace safety, which was always there, more so in certain industries than in others. Whereas there is a complete leveling that is happening, and actually it is becoming equally applicable across all industries.
So, Derek, you mentioned that Walmart example, right? So, like some of those technologies you feel would stick on after, maybe 6 months, 9 months, or however long this thing takes to resolve itself.
Absolutely. So if you look at what Krishnan was talking about digital, right? So if you look at it, an OEM electromechanical manufacturer used to make much of this revenue from only the equipment. So what we are doing in the current scenario is providing with digital value. For example, engineers workbench. It will allow an equipment manufacturer to create a remote diagnostics prognostics application in between 2 to 4 weeks. So it really accelerates creation of value-added services on top of the equipment, which will allow them to differentiate in the marketplace. So things like this. Prior to that, in some companies, digital was a nice to have. Now it's become a must have, and especially creating rapid accelerated solutions. And we feel engineers workbench is one of those rapid accelerators, which will help them create this value-added services. So these things are going to stick, and we are already seeing signs of this with some of the OEM partners we are working with. They really want EWB to accelerate the sales times. because there's a huge revenue pressure on them now.
So the engineers workbench is basically, I mean, it's something that you've developed to allow, non-techies, more the business managers to
Absolutely.
use your facilities, provide them with that kind of a user interface, right? Just tell us a little bit about how it works.
Absolutely. So it's basically, we have democratized creating data science apps for the electromechanical engineer. So if you're a reliability engineer, you want to create a root cause analysis app. It auto generates the app within 2 to 4 weeks, and it's actually a sales accelerator. I would call it EWB as a sales accelerator, and that category is going to dramatically increase. And EWB is a sales accelerator for the OEM itself, and it's going to be a must-have. So yeah, we're very, very positive about that.
So, Krish, coming back to you, you shifted to Houston like 2 years back, right?
It's about a year and 3 months back.
Yeah, I counted the
4 months back.
Okay. So, yeah, so this actually, you could take, traditionally enterprises have insisted on on-site support. How do you see this changing in times to come? Is remote support coming to reality?
So, Sumit, in my personal experience, remote support has always been there. In fact, our entire industry, services industry in information technology, is something actually which has been built for technology related, IT related aspects. It is something actually which has been built on, that entire industry is actually built on remote, doing the things actually remote. But what is strongly happening is, it is becoming all pervasive. It is becoming all pervasive in terms of many other areas. For example, I used to pick up the phone, or I used to go ahead and actually go to the sales front if I needed a service actually on my internet connection. Nowadays, actually, I don't need to do that. So the pervasiveness with which actually it is becoming happening, I think it is more in more in this particular case in terms of remote service. What is more relevant and important is, there are many places which are mission critical, where you wouldn't have even envisaged doing anything remotely. People are consciously about it in terms of actually remote support at this point in time. So, for example, sitting out here in Houston, we have active conversations which are happening today with Argentina. Argentina is actually the third largest shale producing world that is there. And in this time when actually oil and gas rates are under pressure, you are looking at it in terms of actually taking that every single dime out of cost. And we are having conversations from here. And these are the ones which are accelerating at this point. People who are looking at it in terms of going ahead and becoming more automated. So, like I was saying, actually for digital, the way we are seeing it, and like what Derek was actually going ahead and mentioning earlier in terms of vitamin versus painkiller, lot of advanced companies used to look at digital earlier, more as their innovation and the next frontier of innovation that actually they are going to go ahead and run through. Whereas today, the companies that we are talking to are not those companies. They are at actually a different level, but it is more in terms of their existence, their sustenance, and how they are able to go ahead and look at it in terms of leveraging it as a painkiller for today. Those are the conversations actually that are happening.
Let me just take that a little forward beyond remote support. Like, if you could explain it with an example. Like, I'm very familiar with your experience with Henkel, because I wrote about that, where you got in to solve a certain problem, help them with their own digital transformation to be able to capture data, and then got more and more deeply entrenched. Has that process got impacted now, or is it similar? Can you talk about it with an example?
Sure. So, Sumit, what I was talking about was not in terms of the process being changed. There are changes in the process as well on this thing. I will highlight on that. But more so, suddenly the pool of customers who are going ahead and looking at it on adopting these digital solutions, that pool has been enhanced. People who wouldn't have thought about actually utilizing a digital solution is now today looking at it in terms of going ahead and utilizing solutions. The entire approach, the difference that is happening is there is an acceleration in terms of evaluation and an acceleration in going ahead and looking at it in terms of implementing the solution that is happening in today's world. So earlier, people used to say implement first to do the entire data integration, data collection, and go ahead and look at it in terms of actually bring in that visibility initially. And then we will take a break over a period, actually build certain amount of data, and then look at it in terms of how to be able to go ahead and do advanced anomaly detection. And since then, go ahead and take a break and then look at it moving on into the predictive solutions. Today, consciously, and we seem to be in a very, very unique position related to that, because our solution, we had always thought about it in terms of integrating physics-based aspects, which is more in terms of first principles-based aspects, as well as heuristics-based aspects, and the data science-based aspects, all of them actually seamlessly integrated. Today, the power of that particular approach is actually coming to the fore, because there are organizations which don't have the data maturity, because it is not as if actually for the last 2 years they have already connected their processes and everything is actually available on them. But they also want to move forward. And from that angle, there are certain subtleties in the process which is changing. And fortunately for us, because of the approach that we had adopted while building Cerebra, in terms of integrating first principles, heuristics, and data science oriented approaches, we are able to go ahead and fast track the entire implementations.
Derek, I mean, this is something that you actually touched upon it in your presentation, but startups, do they need to pivot to new product lines or propositions, or should they sit through the struggle?
No, they definitely need to re-examine everything. I would say every startup needs to re-examine. Because the budget pools which existed earlier may not exist after this incident. So you need to recalibrate your relevance for the new problem statements which matter to the company at this point in time. So I would definitely say that every startup should examine its relevance in terms of what are the budget pools you're aiming for. That budget pool existed before the pandemic, but after the pandemic, maybe that innovation budget does not exist, or maybe that person itself does not exist. So absolutely, it needs to be reevaluated, recalibrated, and pivoted.
Derek, I think your mic has got.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. So what I was saying was, at the end of the day, startups, the lifeline is the budgets. The customers have to spend on them. So we have to essentially ask a question: has the budget pool expanded, shrunk, or completely dissolved? And once you know the answer to that question, you know how to recalibrate yourself. Yeah.
Krish, this is an interesting question. Has the definition of new normal changed in the last 3 months itself? What are the differences that you see today from the time oil prices went below zero?
There is no normal. That is the new normal, Sumit. Okay, in our experience, actually, every day there are new things that are coming up, and there are new changes that are there. So I go back actually to whoever was the smart person who had gone ahead and talked about it, saying that actually change is the only constant. So compared to 3 months back, whatever actually new normal that we were thinking about, we are sitting today in probably in July, beginning August. At least personally, I would have thought saying that actually in 3-4 months, things would have actually at least started becoming more normal and becoming more this. I would have thought saying that I'm still working out of office. I would have started working out of office. Whereas today I am still not working out of office, I am working out of home. And if I look around and if I see in terms of number of cases that are there, it's only increasing. It's a different a positive take that clearly we have been able to go ahead and contain the tech. So which is a very, very strong situation. And this is something which we will live with for a longer period in time. If I reflect back more on the business side of it, the same is the reality. Everybody was thinking about it on it being like a hurricane, where actually I run into the shelter and kind of live through that particular hurricane for a period of actually 2 days, and then I come back and I start rebuilding. That was the thought process with which actually everybody was talking about it on about normal when earlier in terms of further. It was always about rebuilding after the hurricane. Whereas suddenly you are finding that actually this is no longer a hurricane or flood situation. It is something which you need to coexist for a longer period. And towards that, I run, though I'm not actually a very serious runner, I run. So it is something like actually it's not a question in terms of one specific sprint while you are running actually being able to plan it through. You have to plan it through for actually a much longer period now, and you have to live with it. The sheer fact that actually if you need to go ahead and actually do your run with your mask on, you need to plan for your oxygen actually better in terms of going ahead and sustaining it through rather than actually becoming breathless.
Terrific listening to both of you, Krish and Derek. It's a wonderful session. And thank you again for joining us and kicking off this emerging tech series. Actually, we're going to have several industry leaders from the deep tech, both investors as well as founders coming in as part of this series. So all those of you viewers, thank you for being with us, and keep watching this space. The emerging tech page will keep you updated, and look forward to seeing you again and posting your very interesting set of questions actually. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye-bye.